Hola a todos.
Hello, everyone. You hear me? Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Just this conversation is going to be translated into English. Simultaneous translation is available outside. And just going to welcome Joachim Trier. He's with us. Joachim. Joachim.
Okay, you hear me? Great.
So, cinema today, and this will be a conversation, but at the same time, after some questions and some conversation that we will have, you can answer. You can ask all the questions. You cannot hear the
No, no, no. Okay, okay, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Now? Yes? Okay. So I was saying that this will be a conversation that I will be conducting, but at one point I will open to the audience so you can ask him all the questions you want to know. So as you may know, Joachim has directed 6 feature films already. The first one, Reprise, was his debut film, and it was premiered in Toronto and Sundance and many other film festivals. And then you made Oslo 31st of August, which established him as a very important director in the European cinema. He went to Cannes for the first time, no, with that one. Then you did Louder Than Bombs, which was your first film in the US, and that you went into competition in Cannes with that one. Then you made a genre movie, Thelma, which was a shift. We can talk about that. Then it was the first worst person in the world, right? Which, yeah, not only you went to Cannes, but you won awards there, and you went also to the Oscars, so it was a huge success. And then finally, Sentimental Value, which won the Grand Prix in Cannes this year, and that you might have seen it here in San Sebastian. Yesterday was the premiere. So, well, my first question for you is regarding Reprise. How did you? Well, no, sorry. I'm going to ask you something first, which is very basic, but I love to hear it from filmmakers, which is what made you become a filmmaker in the first place?
Wow, thank you. Thank you all for coming, by the way. It's good to see so many people. I'll try to make sense. I grew up in a film family. My grandfather on my mother's side was a filmmaker. He was a director. His name was Erik Løken. And he made kind of experimental films. He did a film, he was a jazz musician, and he made a film in 1960 called The Hunt, Jakten, which went to the main competition in Cannes at the time, which was a big deal because there wasn't really a film community in Norway. He thought it was what he called jazz movie, and the French called it Nouvelle Vague, and he was very proud. So, but the infrastructure of creating films in Norway wasn't really in place. So he only made one more feature film 10 years later called Remonstrance, Motforestilling, which was kind of an experimental film where all the 5 reels, when you project films on film, celluloid, usually there's 5 or 6 reels in a feature. And he constructed it so that the 5 reels could be shown in any order and still make sense as a movie. So no one saw that film, but I think it's great. So I think I grew up, and my father is a sound designer, and my mom did a lot of documentaries and also worked a bit in movies. So I was, as a child, very aware that movies was something. I was very privileged in the sense that they showed me a lot of movies. So for me, who's sort of a half dyslexic, didn't love school, restless person, for me, the possibility of doing something like making films seemed like a fun thing as a child. And then at some point in my mid-late teens, I'd made a lot of skateboard films. I was a skater. And then suddenly I realized that, hey, I want to try to do this professionally and do something with fiction. And I remember having a weekend at our house when my siblings and my parents were away for some reason, and I went to the video store and rented all of David Lynch's films on VHS again. I'd seen them all, but I saw them during one weekend and had this feeling that everything is possible in cinema. And I remember the next week I spoke to some friends and I said, I think I want to be a filmmaker. And they laughed and said, yeah, we knew that. Didn't you know? And I was, but it's the embarrassment of saying, I want to be a director, which to me is such a big thing in a way. But when I look back at it, it is a natural progression of just filming. And I think the wonderful thing now, and maybe I was one of the first generations who could, because of video cameras and stuff, film from my childhood and onwards. Whereas now, my children, my 4.5-year-old, we're already making animation films on an iPhone. So now I think that is a more natural thing. That just making films is like drawing or something. And that, I think that's a good thing.
Nice. So going to your first film, Reprise, it was a huge success for a debut film. So how did it impact you, and how did you receive all the success, and how this impact in choosing Oslo, 31st of August, to be your second feature?
Yeah. To make Reprise took a long time, and since I was in my late teens, one of my best friends was Eskil Vogt, who I have ended up co-writing with all of the feature films, and also several short films that I did previously. So we worked on Reprise for many, many years, and I had this kind of deal with myself that I'd gone to film school in London, and I'd made some shorts, but I didn't want to. There was kind of a system in the old days, which is now broken, and maybe that's for the better. But there was like, you had to shoot a couple of short films on 16 millimeter. You had to work with a real crew. You had to have achieved some awards to be able to go to the Norwegian Film Institute and apply and say, hey, I want to make a feature film. There was like some process that you had to go through almost to be accepted, I think. And we spent a long time trying to really make this screenplay good. And I think we wrote Reprise 3 or 4 times over again as a training exercise, Eskil and I, just to get to that draft, which was actually our first feature. And it took time. But the truth was that we had started doing, after the short films, I still lived in London. I'd stayed there for a while after film school, and I thought I was going to make an international kind of genre movie. I wanted to do, in a strange way, kind of what Christopher Nolan has done. You know, with admiration for him and everything, but I didn't know who he was at the time. He hadn't made any films, so there wasn't a Christopher Nolan. I wanted to be the guy that made genre suspense thrillers with like Alain Resnais intellectual structuring of time layering and all that stuff. That's what Eskil and I wanted to do, and we couldn't make it work. We couldn't make that script work. We felt lost. It was a deep crisis. And then I realized that I actually cared more about characters. So we started writing Reprise as a reaction to, you know what, we'll work on this big, important American project, but we're just going to try something in Norway and we can hide it for the world, you know, if it doesn't work. And we started making film, having ideas about our friends and life and being young, friendship, creativity, the impossibility of love lives, you know, like all the shit you go through in your 20s. So Reprise came as a reaction out of a crisis, and I'm very happy we made that as the first film, because I learned a lot about working with great actors, and it felt very personal in a way I hadn't expected when I was in film school. And then I had another crisis, and that's the second part of your question, because then that film was distributed in the US by Miramax, and had a journey which we were way beyond our expectations. Remember, I come from Norway, 5.5 million people, a very small language area, with not a really great cinema tradition, to be quite frank. I think there's been some great films being made, none of which have been recognized, at least internationally, you know. So that my first film was distributed was a big deal for me. I didn't expect that. So I went to the US, I got an agent, I went to all the studios, they sent me scripts. I think in the following 2 years I read something between 50 or 70 screenplays. And some of them were very seemingly, you know, high-level productions with actors attached, but I felt completely lost. There was like nothing there for me. And so I started writing Louder Than Bombs, which became the third film. That also took a long time because it was in English. And then after 5 years, or 4 years, I still hadn't done my second feature. And in Norway, there's this tremendous weight on the second feature. When I did Reprise, 80% of directors only did one film. So there was a very little, like, yes, you did a film, but to do the next one was the big task, huh? And then Oslo, August 31st, was kind of a panic reaction that Eskil and I had, where we said, we'll make a film in 1 year to prove to ourselves we can actually do a quick one, like really fast. And the energy of that, I thought, was really inspiring.
In fact, it was. I think it was for many of us here. It was a very impressive film, and it actually gave you a lot of success. And after that, well, as I said, it established you as a important European director. And after that, you finally did Louder Than Bombs. You went to the U.S. and you worked with Isabelle Huppert, you were with Jesse Eisenberg, Albert Byrne, and everything. And how was it for you? Because as I heard now, it was something that you wanted to do as your second feature, but it was your third, and you wanted from the beginning to be an American movie with American actors or international actors?
Because people wanted me to direct in the US, I thought that, okay, let's write our own thing. I went back to Eskil, which is the most wonderful thing I know, is to sit with him and create something together from scratch. In the meantime, the financial crisis of 2008 had happened, and the film industry changed. I know there's some industry people, so I hope I don't bore you all by going into the details. But these things matter, you know. How does it change? So what happened was that all the big studios in Hollywood in the late 90s, early 2000s had like an independent division. You know, you had Warner Independent, you had Paramount Vantage. You know, many of these don't exist anymore. There was a moment in the 90s when music and culture and cinema, everybody wanted indie, you know. Nirvana was suddenly the biggest band in the world for a moment there. So everyone was looking for the new, hip, edgy, underground thing and elevating it. But after the financial crisis of 2008, that went away. So it turned out like the American industry wasn't ready for I need Final Cut. I've had it since film one. To me, it's a moral implication of taking responsibility for what the actors give a director. Mm-hmm. If they show their emotions, their bodies, whatever we create in a movie, that I carry the responsibility of what they bring to the final product. And no one that could sit in some studio capacity and invest money should decide that, in my opinion. That's not how art is made. So that was tough to get a film financed at that time that had a more experimental structure like Louder Than Bombs. So that's also actually a European financed film. We had some American support and some great producers that supported it, but it was made out of Oslo, Norway, and with collaboration with France as well. So I only work in the European financing system my whole career, and I'm super happy about it, and it's given me a platform to express myself very freely. That is constantly under political threat because people, right-wing political movements are always trying to diminish the idea of soft money support for the arts across most countries in Europe. And, you know, it's very important that we have a system that protects free expression through the arts. It's a synthetic thing. It's not something that just happens out of pure capitalism. And no, we need support. Most art has always been supported by someone with an intention of not just making money, but supporting expression and artistic endeavors. Art history shows it. If there's suddenly rich people that have money to spend on paintings, you have a revolution in painting. I'm sorry, these things depend on each other. So this system has really been supporting me, and I know many distributors around Europe. And on top of that, and I'll stop my political spiel and get off my soapbox, but I think it's important to just also be aware that there are incentives to distribute films between our cultures. So that when I'm sitting with Eskil in Norway, we have grown up on watching Pedro Almodóvar's films. And what we like about him is the feeling that he has a universe, which is his, with characters and actors and the feeling of smell and color that's specific, like no one else does. And I don't want to see him, when I was growing up, I didn't want to see him go to LA and do a heist movie. That's not his thing. If he did, it might be marvelous, you know. But I'm kind of glad he stayed with his universe and experimented within that. So that's what I grew up with, the idea of the European auteur. That's and so Louder Than Bombs to me. I know people gave me a hard time at Cannes that year. Oh, it's in English, it's kind of a bit sellout. But I shot it exactly the same way. I was on set with actors that I felt great trust with. Many of the team were also people I worked with before in Europe. So to me, that's a personal film too.
Great. I was gonna ask you about Eskil and about your relationship with him, who has been your co-writer for all of your films. How do you work together, and how is your process with him, and in writing in general? How?
The process is very free. It depends from project to project. Sometimes there's been an idea maybe that I had or we shared together from the beginning. But sometimes it's also been going from the blank page. Like Sentimental Value was, again, getting into the room and spending the time together and having a crisis. Every film comes out of this deep feeling that we will fail and we don't have anything to tell. Most of the time, it's continually this anxiety, and then at least to speak for myself, I stop sleeping well at night and I panic, and out of that panic comes a kind of a grounding experience of feeling that I get in touch with what at the moment is important for me to talk about in a movie, and images and ideas and characters come up. And Eskil and I are such good friends that we can share this kind of anxious, self-deprecating moment and get out of it together as friends. And I think for me, film is about collaboration. You know, it's about. I was a punk drummer and I got kicked out of the band. I wasn't good enough. You know, I'm still yearning for that collaborative feeling of being a part of something with other people. I admire writers who can sit alone and write, but that's not how I work. And Eskil is someone who we have two things happening in every process, which is, on one hand, we are film lovers. We really care about the form of the format, and we can talk about that to get through the day when we don't feel we're very creative. So we always focus on film and music. So yeah, we'll talk about George Cukor or a Godard movie from the 80s that he had seen, and then I see it the next day, or like weird, like all kinds of things. And then also life, that we dare be open and emotional with each other about what we struggle with or what we see people in our lives struggle with. And I think those two elements is what creates the movies we do. It's the love for cinema and personal stuff.
Great. I wanted to ask you about casting. You have worked with some actors that you have been working with them for several films. For example, Anders or Renate. By the way, Renate is in the room. I don't know where you are. Say hi.
Stop ett ögonblick, min vän.
So how? So I wanted to ask you: do you write sometimes with her or with others in mind? And also, how's your process with them in terms of do you rehearse a lot? How you do the preparation, and also in the shoot during the shooting? How's your work with actors?
Yeah, thank you. That's a big question in a way. First of all, writing for someone, I didn't in the beginning because I knew no one. But then I met Anders for the first film, and then he was absolutely a part of doing a film in a year. I knew that we had the Oslo, August 31st, we had a book we based it on, Pierre Drieux, La Rochelle, La Feu Follet. And we also knew we had Anders, and we had a city, and some other ideas of how to twist that story a bit different than the novel. So it was absolutely written for Anders. And ironically, on that film, I met Renate, who plays, I gave you one line of dialogue. Do you remember the line?
Let's go to the party.
Let's go to the party. And the profound depth of how you delivered that line shuttled us into a process of 3 movies. No, but it's again the collaborative thing that I knew. Worst person in the world. We were friends, and I knew that. I mean, it sounds terrible. I'm going to talk about you as material now, my friend. But material, a place, a light situation in a place. Where is the sun on that street in the morning, or what happens when Renate can't hide something and she blushes? You know, events. That's the best material for movies. So if I can, Eskil and I are like, we're not like, oh, we're great storytellers. You know, I don't have that inclination of the story. That's like, okay, you need kind of a sense of a story or in the plot to create a structure of moments that you want to film, events, an event of a place, an event of light, and the human event, which is at the center of everything. But so to have someone you want to write for is incredibly inspiring. So Worst Person in the World, absolutely written for Renate, and the same with Sentimental Value. You were the first in. I knew that, okay, I want to work with a character that I had an idea about that she could do, and at least I have that in that room of anxiety and doubts. At least we have a great actor in the middle of it, and that inspires me.
That's so nice.
I didn't say something about rehearsal. I have a feeling I see quite a few young faces, and I imagine maybe some people that maybe make movies, and as me, and I'm endlessly curious about process. So I think I should just share something about. You asked the question about rehearsal, which to me is very important. If that's okay, I'll take a moment and.
Yes, please.
For me, a rehearsal in movies is very important because what happens is you're constantly struggling with the financial parameters being limited. Less so now that I made a few films. I feel very, lucky and privileged to have more time. But having said that, on the first films I did, because the budgets were so low, I created an honest conversation with everyone, like, hey, the DP, we got to spend the summer going around looking at all the locations and finding our shots before we get on set because we got to move quick when we shoot. So maybe not going to get paid so much, but do you want to do that? And my great friend that I went to film school with, Jacob, the cinematographer, said, yeah, let's do that. And the same with actors in the early films. Now we all get paid a bit more when we have rehearsals, and we're very happy that the producers are paying for that. But in the beginning, it was something we did for free just to make sure we created the best possible script and trust. Those are the two things. I don't look for perfect scenes in rehearsals. I try to get to know the actors. They put their ideas into the script and share this scene, I don't understand, maybe this, maybe that. And we film it, and Eskil does some notes and rewrites some stuff, and we're on the phone and we're stressed. And did you see that take when Renate said something much better? Let's put that in the script instead. And we have this moment when all the actors can come with some input. Usually the structure of the scene is pretty similar, but maybe we drop some lines, maybe something else comes up, and maybe I discover that I don't need so much dialogue. The whole process is trying to get rid of dialogue, because the actors are great. So when Renate comes in, sits down, she doesn't have to say, I'm really angry today. It's like, I feel it. She's angry today. So, so I think rehearsals is, and then trust, that they see that I really dig them. I never cast an actor that I'm not a fan of. All the amateurs, all the children, all the people that come in, I meet them, we spend a long time casting, and I gotta dig them. Because the moment they're in front of the camera, even if it's just a small moment, they are the lead of the film in that moment. And you have to sustain the level, So you know what I mean? So if you look at like Martin Scorsese's gangster movies, all the gangsters are great. That's every film has to have that level. So that takes time. It really takes time. And then trust. For actors to achieve something, my job is not to say the smart thing all the time. It's to try to sit next to the camera and show them love. It sounds cheesy, but it is. Really, like, I love what Renate does. And it's beyond what I expect. And if I'm not open to that possibility of the unexpected, we won't create something that has life. And she knows it, and I know it, and we're terribly nervous in the morning. We drink coffee, and oh shit, yeah, this scene is difficult. Yeah, I know, but you got it, Like, it's just trying to support Renate and the other actors so they can take a chance. And maybe we do some takes where they show their technical brilliance, which they also have often. Renat is a very technically skilled actor. You train in theater. You know how to do your moves. And sometimes that's great for a scene. But then we do the jazz takes towards the end. Or maybe the first one. You already, because you know me now, so you go straight to the chaos. And you're like, you try something and it moves me. And we don't have to discuss it after that. It shows up in the film. And we still wonder what happened in that moment. And you did it, and I don't know how. And all I try is to like create trust so that you can take a chance and not feel like an idiot. And to show like the directorial position is so often this man of power that says, we'll go over there. You know, this is macho bullshit. And I feel the opposite. I feel like, yes, I will have to lead the team and make up my mind and be quick and move forward. But ultimately, it's a humble position of just gratitude, like, okay, we're gonna try this thing, and we could fuck it up. I know, but I believe in you. It's that moment. That's the thing. That's what matters. So, and that's also a big discussion in cinema. Why the direct? I mean, yes, outside of set, we got to do a lot of fighting to help the producers get the money and to make sure no one steps on our creativity, all that bullshit. But on set, we have to really try to be humble towards the actors. That's my ideal, at least.
And that's when magic happens many times. So I know that you're a music lover. Actually, I saw you as a DJ and at a party in Cannes. It was the closing ceremony of the La Semaine de la Critique.
Yeah, you were there.
I was presenting a film there, and I thought at the DJ. I looked at the DJ and I thought, this is Joachim Trier DJing. And
That's why the music was so bad.
No, I was like, okay, so he's a DJ. So then I started like checking on your scores and the music you put in films, and everything made sense. What is the music for you in general in your life, in particular also in your scene, in your movies? How do you work with music?
Yeah, so we listen to a lot of music while we write, and sometimes that music is just for inspiration, and sometimes it ends up in the film. And I think both my father and my mother's father were jazz musicians when they were younger. So I grew up in a household with a lot of different types of music from around the world, and I feel grateful for that. So music is tricky in movies because in a way you want your film to be music itself. So you can kill the film by putting on the wrong music so emotional music is dangerous because it can emphasize and lock down the possibility for interpretation. But the right kind of music can open up a sense of interpretation and space for emotions that are bigger than just Renat is sad, the music is sad, it's all sad, and then you like lock it down. Maybe there's a contrapunct, like a contradictory way of using music, or just to create energy. I mean, I love. So, for example, in Paul Thomas Anderson's new film, One Battle After Another, which many of you, I'm sure, will see when it comes out now. I was lucky enough to see it early. It's a really great film, but it's like feeling that you're in like music. The movement, the temperament of that film to me is like a piece of music. It has music, but it's not music that kills the vibe of the mise en scène, the movement of the camera. And I really, again, I'm the punk drummer that got kicked out of the band. I wish I was a musician on some level, but I'm not. So to try to achieve the emotional openness of musicality through movement in space and time, that's really what cinema at its best could be. I like that. I am... My taste is that directors where you feel the gaze of movement or the approach to humans and spaces that has a specific temperament. And that's really hard to describe. The best example that going back to the main inspiration of David Lynch, everyone who sees David Lynch's work, and we grieve him, we miss him. There's not going to be another David Lynch film. The world has lost an important piece that made sense to us because David Lynch had a vibe, a mood, a place which we love to enter into, and that has to do with his approach to the world. And there's a temperament. I think music is about temperament. Cinema is also about temperament. millions of small decisions that seduce us into a place that's a different place, yet it's also similar to our world. I think that is what I care about the most in movies. So when I think of a film I love, I don't remember the story. I remember moments and feelings of images and spaces and stuff. A bit like memory in my life as well. If you think of an important moment when something happened, like you broke up with someone you love, you don't it's not the date or the complete linearity of the conversation or the night or the morning after or whatever, but it's the spatial condensation of something. That's at least how my memory works. And that is something that the art of cinema can do something about, that vibey feeling of a space and the human experience in that space, the movements of humans. Very often we talk about, Renate and I and the other actors as well, about true movements. It's not about achieving only reality, but it's that the consequence of the scene has true movements in them. The timing, the feeling of the character. Because if the character has the autonomy to do something that has some life in it, it doesn't matter if you're doing a sci-fi or a social realist drama, whatever. It's something human that we can interpret. Not always understand, but we can feel the truth of it in its inexplicable quality. And that's the ideal of art, isn't it? That there is specificity enough to get involved, yet there is space enough to interpret. So the clarity, unclarity, the told and the untold, that thing to me is the important thing. And so the clarity of storytelling that we often are told in film school is like the essence of it. That's not my thing, I realize.
For example, in sentimental value, you just talk about space and time, and you use the element of the house in order to explain space and time. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? How you use these elements?
On a practical level, like again, you set up patterns of themes in a movie, I think, and a big theme in sentimental value is about the reconciliation between children and parents. And realizing, Renate's character particularly, Nora, realizing that Stellan Skarsgård's character, Gustav, the father, there's limited time for them to figure out their relationship. And so having the, almost a childish idea of the house looking back at the human endeavors and their space and the limitation of time, that was a good way to set up the story, I think, thematically. So your intro, you have to like tell people a bit, this is thematically what we're going to discuss and talk about or feel something about. So the house was a framework for that. And also it's just a puzzling thing that we all have periods of homes. Maybe we lived in several homes, or maybe there was one particular childhood home, a house, an apartment where we had all the feelings of seasons changing and emotional events all occurring on the stage of that place. And so that place carries a sense of our memories. And that's just, I think, that's what I talk to my 4.5-year-old daughter about. It's stuff like that, the fundamentals of like memory and time. And like, we care about that fundamentally. And film can play with that specifically, different than other art forms. It has its own way of dealing with that. So in this film, I could try to use that aspect of house and memory in a specific way.
In sentimental value again, Stellan is his character is a film director who cannot connect with his children, his own daughters. Do you believe that cinema is a tool to connect with others? This is a theme that you are exploring?
It is. Yeah, I think it is. I grew up watching movies in rooms like this. I learned about the human behavior and things that no one could say specifically. I was able to experience and observe in movies. And it's a different language. It's just, we have many. I don't speak French, but I learned one dichotomy. Maybe there's a Spanish version of the langue, parole et langue. So it's like speaking language and language as a structure. And language as a structure obviously is much grander. It's way beyond our comprehension. But the spoken language has cultural implications and limitations, and it just doesn't work. So cinema is another, as other art forms have their own versions of this. I believe that, and I'm not talking about changing the world or anything. I mean, that's not the discussion we're having, but the fact that you can, to put it like this, in all the films that we've made, I have met people that have seen them and come to me, strangers, and come to me and shared things and conversations that were on a much deeper level than I expected, and I'm grateful for that. So something must have been transferred in the movie, and that to me is a point of making art.
And in Cannes, when you started promoting the film, you said this sentence that I loved to hear. That is, tenderness is the new punk, and I wanted you know, to explain a little bit more. And I completely agree. And I think the world needs much more of that. And you just said we're not here to change the world, but maybe we can add some hope to the world nowadays.
That would be wonderful, wouldn't it, at this time, if we can contribute to that. I think I come from Norway. It's a very it's a culture with a lot of shame. It's a Protestant culture traditionally, and I think I was in the 90s and early 2000s. I grew up with subculture. I didn't think that the grown-ups knew what they were doing, and I still don't. And I thought a lot of the time the energy of rebellion and provocation and irony were the energies that exposed, again, how language doesn't work and how power structures reoccur again and again that are false and we're being told that are true. And my position has always been an outsider to that. I think many of us feel that. So I grew up in punk, in a way, in the counter position. And I'm realizing now, having children, small children, and feeling quite hopeless about many things in the world and feeling incapable of knowing how to deal with the brutal polarization and aggressive climate of discourse, for example, that I completely understand the need to scream and be fucking angry. I get it. But for this one, for me, on a personal level, I wanted to share a story of reconciliation and try to find intimacy and a soft, hopeful, the power of love, you know, whether you read Erich Fromm or you listen to the Beatles, that there is that energy in the world too, and art can have a radical position by stating that there is a possibility to meet and listen to the other. And that's it. But again, now the film is done and I'm pretending I had a plan. It's just, you know, you do the best you can, and this is what came up in Eskil and me when we wrote it, and with the actors we talked about it a lot. I thought Inga, who plays your younger sister in the film, Agnes, she's so wise and clear in her statements. And she said in an interview we did together recently, like, to me, this story is about the power of love, she said. And I was like, wow, like the old punk in me was like, I wouldn't dare say that. But she's right, that's what we were talking about, is that they actually really love each other. And that's a powerful thing. So, you know, yeah, tenderness is the new punk.
Let's close with this. Thank you so much. And now we open for the audience to make all the questions you want. I don't see anything, so I don't know.
Can I
if
just
there's
say
someone...
to whoever runs the light here that we have these spots, and earlier there was more light in the audience. So if there is a...
now, yeah. Now
oh, here
I
we go.
see you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I see you all. Thank you.
So maybe I go. Ah, you are. Okay. It was. No. Ahí. Ah. Si quieres, quédate en esta zona y si hay otros por ahí...
If you want, you can stay there, and if there's other people, I can go on the ones on the other side.
Más cerca. Más cerca.
Put it closer, or maybe it's not working. You can do it in English.
Hello? Okay. I just wanted to say that I saw the movie Sentimental Value yesterday, and I really, really love it. I'm still
Thank you.
processing it, but I felt what you have just said, that you like transferred something to a stranger like me with that film, and I wanted to say thank you for doing that film, and also the worst person in the world, and thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. That's I said something after we had a big applause at Cannes, which moved us very much, and we were also a little bit shy. I quoted Buñuel, another Spanish filmmaker. I make films for my friends, and I feel that that's my kind of dream, that you can feel close to someone through art. So thank you for sharing that.
¿Alguna pregunta? Ah, aquí. Vale, sí, pues sí.
Hi. So I really love the film. I saw it yesterday, and I had a question. In the film, you talk a little bit about how being a director and having children are something that sometimes it can be like difficult. Like in the film, he wasn't a great parent because he was directing films. And in a conversation with the daughter, he's saying like, you should have children, like you should have someone to love. And she's thinking it's not really that easy, like being a great actress and having children. And I wanted to ask you, like, how has it been for you? I know you're a parent, and how do you think it relates?
Thank you. I think often in films we create questions that we wonder ourselves or that we've felt in our life. To start with the film, I think that Gustav Borg's problem is bigger than just being a lot at work. I think he's a man who's incapable of an emotional closeness, an emotional language that somehow has been hindered or stopped in his life. That could be a comment on a generation, but I think most of all I always focus on the individual in the story. So I think that's his biggest problem. I mean, you're asking a big question. I think if you look at it rationally, the world is not a super great place. We're on the brink of an environmental catastrophe. Economy is not, going great most places. So I have a lot of friends who are scared of having kids for that reason. I'm not going to enter into that conversation because I'm a humanist. Humans are not going to be on the earth forever. But for now, we should keep making them if we can and want, right? So we got to be optimistic. So for me, I was longing to have children, but also there's something really interesting and beautiful about, at least in Norway, I'm going to keep it local because it's difficult to make grand statements. In Norway, we have had a lot of progression about female directors over the last, I would say, 15 years, 20 years. And that has been great for us male directors too, because we have gotten a focus on good set culture, where the macho energy is lessened, and the sense that we need different cultures on set. So it's all not just tough guys, but also in private conversations about balancing being an artist with a lot of demands on you as a director, but also having children. I think actually the feminist discourse around cinema has helped men also allow ourselves a bigger freedom of figuring out open conversations about how we make movies. And on this film, is the first film I made while having 2 children. And I have some of my lovely team here today. Amongst them, one of our producers. I have two of our producers are here. And they were, I said going in, I'm really scared of failing as a father. And it's very symbolic to make this film for me, because I don't want to be Gustav Borg, who's always like, well, I'm at work, so I'm away for 5 months, So we shot in Oslo. I could go home every night. And that was a big deal for me. That was one of the big achievements in this film for me too. I think I'm an okay father, even though I'm a film director. But I had children late. I'm being very personal here now. But yeah, it's an important question to ask, because you also want to be a responsible parent, right? There was a beautiful moment when Lars Thomas, who's sitting right here, my oldest daughter did her first theater play, ironically enough, in kindergarten, and we were doing pre-production work, and I was like, I hate to leave, but I think there's a theater play, and we're making a film about an actress and a father, and Lars Thomas is like, just run now, like you don't want to be Gustav Borg. And you sent me home, and I ran to the kindergarten and saw the play and wept because she was great. And anyway, I'm being a bit cheesy here, forgive me, but those things matter. So we gotta, as a film community, help each other have that spirit. The irony is that I was a child on film sets, and in the 80s things were a bit more, I don't know, laid back, and there was a place for me to be with my parents and my grandfather even, on film sets. So I think there's a possibility, and I believe it's doable, if that's an answer to your question.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch Sentimental Value because I just arrived. But I wanted to ask you a question about Thelma, because Thelma is a film that really shook me very much. Especially, I was wondering, when you conceived it and when you were writing it, how close were you with psychoanalysis, for example? Because I was talking to a psychoanalyst who was telling me all the stages of, I don't know what, I'm not a psychoanalyst, but she was telling me everything was really there that made it coherent, because so many films claim to be psychological thrillers or things like that, but they have no whatsoever relationship with how things are clinically happening. So did you have any involvement with psychoanalysis, or was it purely from your
You're not just laughing at me now.
or was it purely from your writer, or with the actors, or how did that come out into this vision?
Thank you very much, and thank you for mentioning Thelma, which is, many people see as a kind of an odd one out, but as all my films feel on some level equally personal. So thank you for that question, the question of psychoanalysis. The term psychoanalysis is complicated because it has certain interpretative limitations, because people think that it's a purely old school Freudian thing. So just to open it up, and I know that's not what you're referring to, you're talking more about the development psychology of humans and the psychodynamic belief that the automation of the child away from the parent, which is what Thelma is about, is a fundamental human experience, and it has neurological implications and psychodynamic implications, and all of that interests me tremendously. I'm really interested in the idea of self and identity, but in a purely kind of humanist, curious way. I don't sit down and think about it, even though I've read a lot of psychoanalytical theory, and I care about a lot of that, but I think more than anything, it was trying to figure out in that film how some images and ideas that were purely kind of visual and iconic to me, without becoming symbolistic, but as an event, as an occurrence of movement, how that could fit into the story of a young person's development of feeling a connectedness to true will. Telema, I don't know, the occult also plays into this, but the idea of true erotic power of the self, and how that is in contradiction to the restriction of the parent, which is, in this case, in this story, put very almost stylized specifically into a very conservative West Coast Christian context of Norway. And I did a lot of research because I was interested in that culture, and that was scary as hell to see some of those anti-gay, anti-abortion, reactionary, terrible environments for young people to grow up in. That was really in a country which we conceive as liberal and open. And in Oslo, I hadn't encountered those milieus. So that's one thing. But then to try to find the unanimous human interest and experience in a character just finding autonomy, which we're all struggling with continually, I think. So. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the psychoanalytical question, but thank you for noticing. That really matters. Thank you. You want to respond? No. Okay. No, thank you. No, I'm glad it shook you. That it was meant to be a bit more emotionally violent, if I could say.
Voy a preguntar en castellano, tú me traduces.
I wanted to ask you a question related to Thelma. What is your link to fantasy? You've mentioned David Lynch, an absolutely fantastic director, Buñuel, Almodóvar, who also have a link with fantasy. I think fantasy is present in all your films, maybe in a more daily way, as fantasy is synonymous of dreams or desires. But in Thelma, it's a much more fantastic film. It's like almost a superhero film. How important is fantasy in your film? Well, está repitiéndola, no ha captado la segunda parte y le dice, no, en Thelma la fantasía es algo presente y es casi una película de superhéroes, sí. Intentamos ir a fondo, lo veo también como mi curiosidad en el cine es totalmente amplia. He visto mucho giallo y preguntas y temas, películas italianas, de brujas, porque me intrigan mucho. Son experiencias muy físicas que las que se sienten en esas películas y eso me inspiró mucho. También la lectura sobre lo oculto y encontrar imágenes oníricas en todas las películas que hemos hecho. Creo que estamos interesados en la mente. La ausencia en el cine, la gran ausencia, es el interior humano. Eso no puedes mostrar con una cámara. Por eso, una de las virtudes que debo tener es intentar hacer entender la vida interior. ¿Cómo se hace eso? A través de una secuencia de sueños, Julie que se toma unas setas alucinógenas, o es algo, una ambigüedad metafísica fantástica como en Thelma, o secuencias como la que hemos hecho en muchas de nuestras películas, o simplemente es mirar a un rostro humano y dejar el espacio para la interpretación y tener grandes actores. Todas esas cosas para intentar entender las experiencias internas humanas de la consciencia, y es que me parecen tan intrigantes. Entonces, sí, Thelma para mí fue una versión un poco más extrema. Oh, there's a lot of questions. En el Festival de Vilnius vamos a presentar todas tus películas este año y hemos tenido la oportunidad de ver algunas de tus películas que nos han sorprendido tanto. Algunas se me quedaron grabadas y lo van a seguir en mi cabeza durante mucho tiempo. Los cortos. ¿Vas a volver a hacer cortos algún día? Algo que has hecho anteriormente, pero me interesa mucho saber. Todas las preguntas son increíbles. Nadie me ha preguntado si voy a volver a los cortos. Gracias por tomarte el tiempo y quizás por sufrir viendo mis primeras obras. ¿No? Seguro que no salieron como yo hubiera querido, pero bueno, ahora mismo no tengo previsto, porque es muy difícil proyectarlo, hacer los cortos, y cuando hacemos todo el trabajo, conseguimos la financiación con suerte, nos gusta estar con la familia más tiempo. Entonces, me refiero a la familia de los actores. Intento estar lo más tiempo posible con ellos, y eso en los cortos no sucede, pero para mí fue un proceso de desarrollo y me intentó entender un lenguaje. ¿Has visto Pietà? Yo creo que es mi mejor corto. Cuando lo veo digo, ¿cómo conseguí hacer eso? Que era un imbécil en la escuela de cine con 25 años. Es una obra muy ambiciosa, nunca podría volver a hacerlo, porque ahora soy otra persona. Pero me siento orgulloso de haber tenido el valor. Es bastante pretencioso, porque filmo en blanco y negro a Alain René con en muy poco tiempo introduzco muchísimas emociones y no estoy preparada, pero joder, tengo una energía increíble, estoy orgullosa. Entonces, gracias. Me alegro mucho de que lo hayas visto. Felicidades por la película, me encantó. Quería preguntar si Valor Sentimental tiene tiene muchas capas sentimentales sobre los personajes, la manera que ellos ven el mundo, el arte, el cine. ¿Cómo trabajas en estas capas, en el guión y luego con los actores y también con tu forma particular de filmar esas escenas? Vaya pregunta, pero gracias. La idea de la historia, valor sentimental, se podría reducir a un argumento de 1 hora y 20 sencilla, y esa estructura está yacente en el interior. Pero bueno, a mí lo que me interesa son los personajes, el comportamiento humano, y eso está en el guión y también está en la actuación de los actores. Y también la producción de las películas y permitirnos tiempo para explorar de verdad y darnos cuenta de que algunas de las cosas que aparecen en el cine al final no las habíamos previsto, pero responden a las demandas del guión. Entonces mi trabajo es estar atento en cada etapa del proceso para elegir la mejor posibilidad, sabiendo que yo en mi alma hay una temática que quiero desarrollar, y intento en las fases primarias que todo el mundo se implique para que vuelvan a mí con sugerencias, pero siempre dentro del marco de la historia o de la estructura temática que ya tiene el guión. Y la ironía es que al final va y vuelve con el tiempo. Creo que en la última película, en Sentimental Value, esto se ve muy claramente porque son experiencias humanas sencillas. Ser hermano, ser padre, ser niño, todo el mundo tiene en ese proceso, todos los que han trabajado en la película han contribuido de alguna manera al proceso. ¿Está encendido? Sí. Quería hablar de los personajes. Me preguntaba, porque creo que eres uno de los mejores guionistas cuando se trata de hacer personajes y la complejidad que tienen y luego mostrarlos en la pantalla. Me preguntaba si estos personajes están inspirados por personas en tu vida. Soy noruega, por cierto. Hi. Que eso es todo un cumplido. Muchas gracias. Bueno, se trata de muchas cosas diferentes. Al final, he aprendido de los actores, y Eskil también, que es un director genial y ha hecho películas suyas y las que ha dirigido sin mí, y hablamos mucho del proceso de crear personajes. Hemos aprendido de actores que tienes que ponerte en su lugar, tienes que preguntar cosas subjetivas a todos los personajes. Entonces, un buen ejercicio a la hora de escribir es que, por ejemplo, si tienes una escena en la que alguien entra y es un personaje no secundario, tienes que imaginarte a esa persona cuando se levanta, como quién son y quién son de verdad, para darles el carácter. Tienes que ver todo el entorno. Entonces también abrirte al hecho de que al final es como hacer documentales. Yo filmo a Renata ese día en su vida. Está fingiendo ser otra persona. Hay un proceso en el que Renate ha tomado su parte y la complejidad de su personaje, porque es una actriz genial. Y se convierte en Nora durante un tiempo. No va disfrazada y habla un dialecto, sino que por la mañana se levanta y se pierde en este personaje, y esto es lo importante. ¿Está ahí presente en el guión? Bueno, tampoco creo que me inspire tanto este personaje es aquel o el otro, sino que como tengo que entender como actor, que cada uno de ellos, quién es cada uno de ellos. Y luego la dinámica de la escena, la dinámica, lo que llamamos la dinámica, no es el conflicto en realidad, sino la estructura de su comportamiento entre unos contra otros. También hay escenas en las que hay gente que está sola, pero muchas veces vienen dadas por el contexto de los eventos, o simplemente el tiempo que están solos es un misterio, y ahí es todavía mucho más importante el comportamiento del personaje, que tenga consistencia o coherencia con lo que siente, porque no queremos ver a alguien en la pantalla, alguien que tenga una intención oculta. Todo tiene que ser específico, claro, pero no tanto como para que sea obvio. Entonces siempre trabajamos con eso, intentando... Bueno, qué pregunta más complicada. Espero lo he contestado lo mejor posible. Gracias por compartir. ¿Podías hablar de tus proyectos futuros? Sobre todo... vivo en China y soy productor y quizás, pero preguntaba si tenías un proyecto que puedas filmar en China, porque la sentimentalidad y la ternura que tú sabes proyectar es algo que la gente está en China podía identificarse. Bueno, pues no lo sé, no tengo ni idea. Sería emocionante filmar en China. Nunca he estado en China y me encantaría ir. No lo sé, sinceramente no tengo ni idea. Tengo pequeñas ideas aquí y allí, pero de momento no hay nada sólido como para saber cuál va a ser mi camino. Has dicho que toda tu carrera y tu camino ha sido la de mantener el corte final o sobre todo en este proyecto en concreto. ¿También te sientes lo mismo a la hora de proteger la ventana de salas o de teatros de tus películas? Sí, bueno, gracias por esta pregunta tan política. Bueno, en mi contrato no está la intención de ciertos meses de exposición, sino con los productores y con todos los distribuidores con los que trabajamos, es intentar la película en pantalla grande el mayor tiempo posible, y elegir el distribuidor adecuado, aunque pague un poco menos, pero que vaya a priorizar la exposición en salas. Quizás es porque sea viejo, pero eso es lo que me preocupa, y me importa una mierda si está de moda, a la mierda. Aunque estemos en muy pocas salas, bueno, esto va a existir, y eso es lo que me importa. Vamos a dejar de hablar negativamente de una película porque y de esto de que el cine está muriéndose. Hombre, por supuesto hay retos económicos y la estructura está cambiando, pero ahora mismo el momento es ideal para películas personales, con la intención de conectar a nivel íntimo con la audiencia, como las bandas indies. Entonces, y ese mercado nunca ha sido pensado o creado para ganar dinero. Entonces, bueno, en Europa, en el mundo, esto existe, y para mí esto es importante. Quizás es una lucha a la hora de hacer películas, porque tienes que tener ganas de enfrentarte a conflictos. Eres director, yo soy guionista, así, y escribes para la pantalla. Sí, soy WGA, trabajamos mucho con dinero de colaboración, capital de colaboración. Sí, bueno, entiendo de dónde vienes, y creo que todos tenemos que contribuir a mantener el cine en salas. ¿Tú crees que los cineastas pueden hacer algo? Bueno, el final cut, el corte final, tiene que estar ahí. ¿Los cineastas pueden hacer algo para intentar no evitar, pero disminuir la imposición de los streamers? Sí, bueno, es complicado, porque te sientes muy vulnerable cuando lanzas tu ópera prima. Entonces, bueno, no voy a hablar de las personas que no han conseguido tener el control de su Final Cut, pero es como es como hacer una huelga y luego quieres que todo el mundo participe en esa huelga. Y bueno, no voy a hacer que se sientan avergonzados porque hay es muy difícil hacer películas y todos los años se hacen películas en que el director no tiene control del resultado final, pero son geniales. Pero lo que quiero es, a mí nadie me ha intentado nunca detener. Debo de tener la suerte de haber trabajado con productores muy comprensivos, pero hay un par de argumentos para luchar por el Final Cut. Uno es una lucha de poder, la responsabilidad moral respecto a al cinematógrafo, el director que lleva meses alejado de su familia para trabajar en algo que Eskil y yo, todos los demás, hemos creado. El tener el poder de tener el interés, de que el interés financiero nos moleste, interfiera en ese grupo. Entonces, yo se lo muestro a mucha gente, hago proyecciones muy diferentes y tomo todos los comentarios negativos, peyorativos, no porque quiero ser comercial, sino porque lo que quiero es que la película sea buena y que comunique ni demasiado poco, encontrar un equilibrio. Cuando tienes el Final Cut puedes proyectar más porque nadie va a tomar el control por ti, entonces te da esa libertad y al final de cuentas lo que diría que en la historia del cine hay muchas películas que han resultado comerciales, han sido hechas muchas veces por directores muy implicados en el guión, en la edición y que han tenido esa sensación de controlar todo el conjunto y que han logrado expresar algo y también han sido de las películas de mayor éxito desde el punto de vista financiero. Entonces, mi punto de vista a la hora de trabajar con actores, los protejo, los mimo, y así es como los productores deberían de trabajar con los directores. No contrates a un director si no quieres ayudarle y mostrarle tu afecto, y también los escritores, los editores. No quieres, como productor, no quieres hacer algo que este director hizo su trabajo lo mejor que sabe, lo mejor que sabe cuando yo fui su productor. Yo quiero que Renata haga lo mejor que sepa como actriz, y creo que los elementos de financiación deberían de sentirse así también con toda la película, con todo el equipo. Creo que tenemos que terminar. ¿Tenemos una pregunta más? No. Muchas gracias. Gracias a todos.